got this email from Kevin, probably more than over the weekend, a couple days ago, asking about handling objections, or I don't know so much of objections as much as prospects who are tacitly barely interested, seemingly so, and how to build value in people who may not be like excited to die and need the policy today to cover it, right? Because not all your clients and prospects are going to see that you sell aren't necessarily thrilled about buying a burial insurance policy. Sometimes the need isn't plain and obvious. Sometimes it's a little bit obscured. And you as a salesperson, because that's what you ultimately are, your job is to uncover need and to find need that maybe they don't clearly see for themselves, right? For example, you may have a client who insists that they've got enough money in the bank, that when they die, years from now or whenever, that the money in the bank is going to cover them. Well, we've all lived long enough to know that things happen unexpectedly, like having to spend the money you thought you never had to. And your ability to make that realistic reality of things happen that you don't plan for, and how does that impact your desire and need for a plan? Your ability to make those connections is how you're going to make sales where maybe another agent wouldn't, okay? And how to maximize the conversion rate. So I'm going to start by reading Kevin's email, and then we're going to go over each of these. I'm going to ask the managers and you guys too to kind of interact, to kind of think through this process, because everything we're going to talk about, y'all will hear in the field. And the difference between mediocrity and success, profound success, sometimes just lies in knowing how to deal with different situations like this. Okay. So from Kevin, he said, do you have any scripts, rebuttals, or training on creating or uncovering the prospect's why? When prospects have a personal experience with someone not having life insurance, it's very easy to dig and get them emotional and buy 100%. And that's what will happen probably about 2/3 of the time. By the time you're in your 60s, someone you've loved has died. You don't really get to your 60s and not have lost a mom or a dad, much less somebody you love or cared about. So you always have that to dig into. But there's going to be about 1/3 of the case where maybe the clients are a little more concealed, they're not as forthcoming, right? Or they just don't seem like they care. So you got to know how to deal with that. But that 1/3 is still closable once you dig at the thing and scratch the itch, if you will, and get to the core of their concerns, because they did fill the card out. They did answer the ad on Facebook. There's something there. It's your job to find it. However, when they don't see the value in final expense, in other words, when you haven't uncovered the need for them, think about it like the need is there, they just don't see it. Your job is uncovered. I'm having a hard time articulating the value of this insurance and asking the right questions. Do you have any specific training on this or something that will help me? So we went back and forth, and here was the questions, or the objections that he asked. And we're just going to go down the list here and kind of address each of them. So the first one here is the kids will take care of it. So if you're setting an appointment, and let's ask you guys out there, you're on the phone setting an appointment, or you're starting a telesales call very early on, and they're like, yeah, I remember sending that in, but I've already talked to my kids and they said they're more than happy to spend the money for it. What is the response to that, either at the door or on the phone early on, setting an appointment or selling over the phone? What's the response to that?
Is there any takers out there? If not, I'll take it.
You're up.
Okay. Batter up.
Yep.
Me personally, I'm going to come at it because I'm a son. I've got a father. And I'm going to tell him, hey, I totally get that, Miss Jones. Let me tell you from my perspective, with my father, I don't want to have to pay for my daddy's funeral. And the reason I don't is not because I'm stingy. It's because life happens. And I may have money today, but I'm smart enough to know that can all change tomorrow, Miss Jones. So I would advise my dad to talk to a professional and get the best coverage to make sure, if my finances are not like they are now, that we're not going to have to beg, borrow, GoFundMe to pay for my daddy's funeral.
Yeah. And here's the thing. To me, I like that. If they start giving you that talk at the, and it's good at the beginning or the close. Like if you hear that at the close, everything David said there, along with, so which one of these do you want to start today? That's how you want to close. At the beginning
I'm
of the
sorry,
call,
Dave.
yeah, you're fine.
I'm closing all the time, man. My bad.
There you go. Hey, we'll accept that.
I didn't hear where were we at in the presentation? I thought we were at the close.
Yeah, no, at the beginning, what we're gonna say when they say,
okay, we're at the beginning.
When they say something like along the lines, my kids are gonna handle it, my response, as well as yours, should be is, hey, that's fine. All I need is 5 minutes for me to show you how this works, and what you do with it's up to you. I'm gonna come by at 10, or does 2 work better? We don't get into a conversation with them about that. It could be, and most likely is, a put off. It's not real. It's a smoke screen. So you need to close, because the goal as a face-to-face agent, this is what we're talking about here, is to close and get into the door. Okay, it's to get into the appointment, not to sell it. Now, if you're over the phone and you hear something like that, it's very much the same. Hey, totally understand. All I need is 5 minutes to show you how these programs work, so you totally understand how this is totally different. What you do with it's up to you. And then you ask a question and you continue the process. And again, if Tim wants to jump on and explain this, kind of how he looks at it, I think he explains it well. If they keep talking and they keep answering you and they don't just flat out hang up, you're still in the game. You just got to keep pushing. You got to keep going. And the key thing is you want to ask a question, get quickly past what they said, because it's probably not real, and then continue your presentation where you left off. Key thing is, don't take the bait. If you're in the beginning, oh, he told me his daughter was going to cover it. No, you can't believe what they say. That's sales, especially in the beginning. People tell all sorts of white lies to get rid of you because they don't know who you are. You're a stranger. Okay. So don't fall for the bait. Push forward, answer, rebuttal, and then continue. Okay. All right. Now at the close, David's was 100% spot on. If you've got a personal story, by the way, which David implemented there to some degree, you should too. If you've dealt with somebody dying, if you've had a mom or dad die, don't be bashful. Share that story. You want to inject humanity and a personal experience into this objection sales stuff as much as possible. It makes it all that much more real and believable. Okay. The key thing with what you say, though, on the rebuttal is make sure you always close. Always be closing. Like David said, he's closing all the time. But at the close, you absolutely want to make sure you're closing. So the one thing what you say, and it will vary, is you want to say, hey, totally understand. Here's why, blah, 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 explanation. So which one of these options do you want to start today? Or what's your middle initial? That's another way to close, just the assumed close, where you assume they're going to pick something and you go right to the application and start filling it out. Does that make sense, everybody? And I think what you'll find happen with a lot of closes is what you say in the middle, from a formulaic approach, it's pretty much the same. You say, hey, that's fine. I totally understand why you're saying. Then you respond to that objection. The response can vary from the different types of objections, but the close is the response, and then the answer and the close is always the same. You always want to close no matter what you say. That's most of it, really, because it's just pushback. But you want to also make sure in the close as well in the beginning. But when you're going through these objections, be confident. Sound like somebody who's believable, as you're saying, and that you're excited about it and you're not deterred by it, that you still are a believer in the conviction of what this does. Does that make sense? You're convicted. You want to make sure if you sound waffly and unsure, people will hear that. And they're like, in a sense, it's like, well, you don't believe enough in this by how you sound about it. Well, then I don't either. Make sense, Joe? Any questions on that? Kevin, hey, yeah, pop on. How you doing, man?
Hey, David. Yeah, so what would the word tracks be? I mean, it sounded like Mr. Heath said kind of like money comes and goes. Have you experienced you have money at some point? We have expenses. It's the same thing for your kids. If you were my father, I would want you to talk to a professional. So I'm trying to, understand those exact word tracks, because the start and the end are going to be the same.
Yeah, start and end are going to be saying the word track is going to be like, hey, I totally understand why you'd say this, but here's the thing. At the end of the day, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? While your kids may be well-meaning and they want to take care of you, what if they run into financial problems? I'm sure you've had them. I know I have. And it's your responsibility to take care of your own stuff. And what if they're in a situation where they'd have to depend on their kids? You probably wouldn't want your grandkids to pay for your kids' burial, right? Yeah, of course not. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this out. You're going to have total peace of mind. You're so happy you had this because, like you said, you wanted to have coverage to take care of this so you wouldn't be a burden. So let's go ahead and get this started. And here's the close. Which one of these three do you want to start with? There is a word track for that specific objection in the close section of the script. So make sure you guys pick that up. And by word track, we mean script. So if you guys look for that for the close one. Now, if you hear this midstream in the pre-qualifying, because there's instances where this comes up. If I hear, I'll have this conversation really that we just had this word track in a more conversational way. And I kind of play devil's advocate. Okay, so your kids will pay. Well, what happens if they go broke? What happens if they lose their job? How are you going to pay it then? And do you really think they should pay it? Why should they be responsible? Should your grandkids pay for your kid's funeral? Sometimes changing that perspective, and that's what we're trying to alter here, changes how they look at the situation. Okay. David, you want to add something to that?
Yes, I just want to make sure everybody understands that midstream of the script, we need to be asking questions.
Right.
We don't need to be, the close is different. Midstream, we're just asking questions because that makes their minds trigger about things that they've heard happen or has happened in their family. We want them to start talking again after that, but not about their kids, about something else.
Right. 100%. Right. Again, in pre-qualifying, we're trying to open their minds to the realities of the circumstances they're in. Right. And people have, and it's just how people are, we have this perspective on life. Right. And we have an idea of how things should or couldn't happen. And that runs into direct opposition with how life actually turns out. Right. And sometimes it's one thing to force people to do things. It's another thing to help them see the light. That's kind of what we're trying to do with these open-ended type of questions, is to help these prospects see perhaps their original ideas aren't the best, and that what we're proposing is really the best opportunity. So moving on to the next one, I don't need it. So I'll answer this for the beginning. I don't need it. It's the same objection rebuttal on the phone, starting the call, no matter what. Hey, that's fine. All I need is 5 minutes to show you how this works. What you do with it's up to you. If I'm selling over the phone, I'm going to ask them some kind of question, a pre-qualifying question, another rapport building question, depending on where you're at in the script. Just going to continue the process, right? And then for booking an appointment, I'm just going to offer a 10 o'clock or a 2 o'clock time, an alternate yes option, right? They don't know if they can, and think about it. They don't even know what I'm selling. So how could they say they don't need it? It's not even a real objection. It's just what people are saying is not what they really mean. Hardest thing for me to embrace and accept is that people say things they don't actually mean. So if you are like I was, more of an optimist, I'm now a realist. That might take you the wrong way, but it's just how it is. You're a salesperson. You're off-putting. You're concerning. You might take their money. You might rip them off. They're fearful. They already hate all the telemarketing calls they're getting, right? So they're going to respond this way, not because they think you're a bad person, because it's a defensive posture against risk. And so we can't get mad at them for them. We all do it too. But we have to know how to deal with that reality. And it's likely when they say things like a lot of this initial objections, it's just not true. And you have to just hear it as what it is. It's just a little bit of knee-jerk resistance. Does that make sense, everybody? Now, if I hear I don't need it midstream, I usually don't. People don't flat out say I don't need it midstream, like when you're in the pre-qualifying section. If you're asking and following the script like you should, what was your reasons for sending this card back? What were your thoughts and concerns? What if you die tomorrow? How's this going to be taken care of? What do you want your new policy to do for you? You're not going to run into this that much. You may run into it at the end, but they almost never say, I don't need it. I don't think I've ever run into, I guess I have a few times, but I have run into instances where people say things like, I don't really need it, but you really don't hear it that much. what you hear instead are things like, I need to think about it, or, let me pray about it, or so, whatever, right? And there's something, again, that smoke screen is protecting against the real objection, okay? And how do you deal with that? Well, you got to isolate the objection. Hey, that's fine, but when you say I need to think about it, how do you mean? Give them an opportunity to come up with what really is concerning them. You then isolate that. Okay, so besides the price, is there anything other than the price that would keep you from starting today? And if they say no, the price is it, then you go into an ultimatum. Okay, so what you're saying here is if we can fix this price and make it affordable, you're ready to start, right? Yeah. And then at that point, the word track is just dropping the price in this instance. Great, let's just do this. You're on a fixed income. Let's just lower the price. We'll add more later. We can always do that in the future. But the important thing is to get something in place, because something's better than nothing, right, Mr. Prospect? You don't know when you're going to die. I don't either. But we do know you're going to need to be protected. So why don't we start with this $40 a month one, or would you prefer the 30? And then you go back to closing, okay? So that's how you handle that. Again, I don't need it is not what you're going to hear. It's going to be, I need to think about it, which is hesitancy, typically fear over price, commitment issues. And the way you beat that back is saying, hey, there's no promise for tomorrow, no guarantees, something's better than nothing. The kind of objection rebuttal strategies we teach. Okay. David, do you have a good analogy for insurance to clear up uncertainty of what our products do? Can you come on the mic and explain that question a little bit more, please?
Yeah, so most of the time in sales, when you get objections or a no, it's because the prospect is uncertain of the product and why they need it. So, handling these objections, kind of their smoke screens, is great. But when someone says, hey, my kids are going to pay for it, or actual objections why they don't think they need it, is there a good word track to kind of demonstrate why you need the insurance, kind of like car insurance? Some kind of analogy to explain it clearly of what the product actually does and why everyone needs it.
I don't really have a word track per se, but my response would be like, hey, you're going to die. And there's two things in life that are certain: death and taxes. Both cost you money. And we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring you. So why wouldn't you need a policy? The one thing about this insurance is we know it's going to pay. So I say things like that to try to simplify it. David, Joe, or Tim, if you got something else to even make it even simpler, feel free, or anybody else who want to throw it in. David, go ahead.
Well, a lot of times I'll just mention how I'll do what you did, Dave, because that's key. That's the same way I do it. But if that doesn't work, I will go with something like, tomorrow's not guaranteed, and then I'll say, I've been doing this long enough that I've seen it pay out. I've seen bank accounts get frozen. I've seen the funeral still happen because of life insurance. Because we have to paint a picture that even when they die, crazy things can happen with their money. It can get froze. It can get thrown to probate. That may be a little too in-depth for some people.
Right.
But just say the money can get froze for a while and they're sweating the funeral. This is going to.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm curious if anyone brings up or questions, question-based. Mr. Prospect, has anyone passed that's close to you, and maybe dig in that way? Has anyone passed recently in your life? Did they have insurance? Did they not? Because I think if you experienced it in your personal life, I guess that's one way to then dig, because every lay down has been like, someone just passed away. I want to make sure I have this so my loved ones aren't hurt. Death is pretty expensive.
Yep. Joe.
Yeah. Man, these are good questions from Kevin. Yeah, this is why it's so imperative to find out the why. Why did you really fill out the form? So I'm just going to give a quick example that something happened where I got layers I had to unpeel 3 layers to really figure it out. I said, what were your thoughts and concerns? I'm really interested in knowing what happened recently, She started talking about her husband died 8 years ago. I went through that a little bit. And then I said, that was 8 years ago. What else happened recently? I put a defibrillator in 5 years ago. I kind of went through that. How did it feel knowing you had to have a serious health thing go on? What were you thinking about as far as your life and your life ending, But then I said this, I said, those are really good reasons to think about this stuff. But this is what I'm interested in knowing, because I'm sure you've seen that Facebook ad hundreds of times over the last couple of years. Most of the time you don't fill out the form, but this time you did. What happened in the last couple of weeks that made you want to do this? Here it is. I've been having chest pains. My doctor's saying that it is heartburn, but I think it's something worse. So my point is, you got to find out the why on this form. Everyone isn't just filling out these forms because they're curious. And then also with people that are saying kids and all that, kids will pay for it. I got savings, all this stuff. I'm going to go around with the really good questions and the stuff like David Heath is saying. At the end of the day, though, I will tell you, if they don't care, then I don't care.
Yeah.
And if they act like it's not a big deal, I'm leaving to go knock on one of these other 40 leads that I got with somebody who actually cares. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very powerful. And Kevin, that really is Joe summing up the core of this. What is their motivation? What is their motive? And this is all in the script. If you follow our script, for example, what you talked about earlier, Kevin, about recent experiences they've gone through, that's in the script too. We put that there because, like you're discovering, like it's powerful. It gets people emotional, and emotion is what encourages people to make decisions quickly, right? And seeing that there's an urgency aspect to it. Yeah, feel free to come back on, Kevin. Yep.
So I guess you just need to gauge when you hit that emotion. Like Joe said, he kept digging, and that is the script, right? He kept.
It's the script, man.
Find the real. So that's the skill, knowing what the real reason is, and just keep pushing for it.
And they won't always tell you too. That's part of that, like, second or third page of the script for telesales and face-to-face. A lot of the times you'll get the surface level. Well, I just seen this ad a million times. I figure I send it out and fill it out and see what happens. That's not the reason why, Kevin. And that's where Joe is like, yeah, I get it, but why now? What happened now? And it's like, man, I got these chest pains and made me think about dying. I'm worried. We got it. They're afraid of dying and not being prepared, right? And when you know that, then throughout the rest of the script, you always revisit those hot buttons. Hey, this is perfect for you because you said, hey, I'm afraid of dying. This fully covers you from the first day. You want to make sure you're protected. This never cancels. That is powerful, but it originates back with the why. Almost every reason you guys don't make the sale is because you didn't dig enough into the why. Okay, Tim. Hey, Tim. What if they say I have savings for my funeral? I already bought my plot funeral things, including caskets, or I already have a plenty on my government job. That's a whole life plan. So we have to recount what was the reason why they sent the card in. What was their concerns? Why did they send this in lieu of having this stuff, right? So I want to go back to that. And better yet, I want to make sure I cover that so that I understand what motive there was. And that takes, again, like Joe demonstrated it beautifully, you can't take their first answer many times as the reason why. It's an excuse a lot of the times. I filled it out because I saw it. That's not their motive. Like, nobody wants to deal with you. You're a salesperson. Then trust me, that's their motive. Their motive wasn't to talk to you and to send it back. There was something else, and you got to figure what that is. And if you read the script, it'll go over, okay, hey, I get it. You see this all the time, but really, why now? What's happened in your life that's caused you to be concerned about dying? And you got to frame that question that way. What has caused you to be concerned about dying and having money to take care of it, so that they can frame the question in that regard, right? And if you don't get a good answer out of that, guys, there's probably not going to be a sale, right? And that's kind of where we're all going here, right? Between Joe, David, and the rest of us. If you don't get to the why, it's tough, man. It's very tough. Now, specifically with some of this stuff, caskets, funeral things, etc., there's always a need for money when you die. There are things that you know, and there are things that you don't. There may be money to pay for additional aspects of the funeral that aren't covered in their plan or what they've purchased. There may be money that needs to be on hand to pay for people to come in and visit, right? Maybe they got to fly in or travel, and they're financially in a position where they don't have the money. A life insurance plan is not just for burial, it's for anything. It's cash on hand to do what you please. So that's a reason to have it too, is just for the extra funds to just in case stuff, right? The government whole life job. Yeah, okay. So you've got the plan. It might be a good strategy in this case to set that plan aside as something that you would give to your survivors, right? Like extra money of legacy, and then have a second plan that's strictly for the burial or strictly for the cremation. Okay. So think about it this way. A funeral home, they want to charge a lot of money, right? I think we all can agree with that. And if you walk in with a $50,000 or $100,000 whole life, they've got a lot more wiggle room to get what they want and charge what they want versus if you just walked in with a 10 or a 15,000. Okay. So I kind of use that. That has worked actually more often than not, where people are like, yeah, it's like playing poker with your face cards up. You don't want to do that. Show them something else so they don't know about how much real money you got. And that way, it's taken care of with this plan. And this one, what it's for is to take care of your loved ones, right? So that presentation of how to pitch the product can help make the connections, because that's what we're trying to do, is uncover the need and see if there's a need there. Okay. Yeah, and Dustin, kind of to go back to Kevin's point, like what's the word track to kind of summarize what we do? It's peace of mind. Peace of mind and protection from financial woes that cause when you die. David Heath.
Hey, to reiterate what you said about the large policies, it's honestly true. I've seen people give $23,000, $25,000 for a $10,000 funeral because they walked in there, gave the funeral home the authority to call the life insurance company, see what they had up front, and I tell them that, and I say, hey, I've seen this happen. Look, let's just get a small one to cover it. We'll let them see that one. The big one goes to your family. That's what you really want anyway, isn't it, Miss Jones?
Yeah, 100%. Very good. It works. It definitely does. All right. Oops. Let's keep going here. Got some more. I'm young. I don't need to worry about it. Yeah, no, I get it, Mr. Prospect. I'm young too. I'm 38, But hey, people die. Things happen. You ever heard the old saying, man plans and God laughs? Yeah, me too. The truth is we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Who was that basketball player that died in the helicopter wreck? What was his name? Is that Kobe?
Is it Kobe Bryant?
Yeah. Kobe Bryant, top of his career, his life, everything was perfect. Do you think he was going to die in a chopper wreck? He was young as I am, I think, probably a little young. It happens, right? So what do you think, based on that, makes you any different? So, we have life insurance not because we hope we don't, but we know that we will die and we need to be protected. And not having it is living in a fantasy world. Does it make sense? Sometimes bringing in, especially if you deal with younger people, bring in, again, why did you send this back then? What was your reason? Do you know anybody, and again, script-wise, follow the script. Who have you known that have died? Have you know anybody who was healthy and then died suddenly? Not just who was sick and then died? They likely do, right? I'm on some Facebook group for our high school reunion, and there's some people that are dead that I went to school with, they were healthy. And then you can use, stories just from popular society, like the Kobe helicopter crash. They remember that, probably pretty big deal. So you got to make that connection that youth isn't a reason not to have it. So that's when they say I'm young and don't need it. Okay. Have too much going on right now. Hey, I get it. All I need is 5 minutes to show you how this works, and then I'm be out of your hair. How does 10 o'clock or 2 sound? I've got too much going on right now. I'm going to think about this. And then it's back to that whole, that's just a smoke screen. Hey, when you say you got a lot going on right now, that doesn't change the fact of what you said, that you need it, that if you die, you're in trouble, that you need this and be protected. What's really causing you to put the brakes on this? Try to get to the real core of the problem, right? I'm waiting till I'm 65. Are you going to die before 65 or after 65, Mr. Prospect? Well, I don't know. I know exactly. So why wouldn't you get a plan then? We don't know when we're going to die. That's exactly why you need it. Does that make sense, y'all? Again, you go back to the core issue here, which is death is certain, but the time in which we die is uncertain, right? You have to speak that narrative all the time, that life has a way of just ending abruptly without, prior notice. And then I have a pre-need policy. This is a different one. David, you want to hit that on? How do you deal with I have a pre-need policy?
Well, I hope I hit it correctly because I've been doing this way for years. So if I'm wrong, I'm in trouble, folks. No, pre-need, I'll sometimes, and this come up in our meeting today. Sometimes I will even call the funeral home with them at their house and let them ask them to explain their policy to them. That works really good, honestly. But here's what I'll tell them if they don't want to do that. I'll let them know that, yes, I'm glad you did that. Most people don't even think enough of their families to prepare or to plan. I said, and you've done something, and that's great, but what you've done may not be exactly what you think it is. And then I'll say, Miss Jones, I know with the ones I've helped, the plan's going to pay a certain amount of money. Now, when did you get that plan? Oh, you got it last year? How much have you paid into it, Miss Jones? Okay. Well, so you've paid $642. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well, do you know how much that would pay if you died right now, Miss Jones? $10,000. No, ma'am, that's incorrect. It would pay $642. So you want to let them know that it's kind of as we get paid as earned. That's kind of how the funeral is with a pre-need. David, have you got any other things that you would add to that?
Yeah,
I do go a little deeper, but I don't know if I want to tell them that.
Yeah. So the pre-need plans, I've always had a hard time with these because it's really a different caliber client. It's typically more middle class, somebody who has a little bit more access to money, a little different needs. Like final expense is a lower income clientele. They're not going to buy a pre-need plan. Okay. I have better success deterring people away from considering pre-need. Like I'll just go down to the funeral home and plan it. And I'm like, you know what you're about to get into, right? You're going to spend hundreds of dollars. It's going to be locked into the funeral home. You may not even qualify and be covered for 2 years because a lot of these pre-need plans are simplified issue products. You're not covered. It just depends on the health. They're a little bit more tighter on health in my experience if you get a pre-need, and it's a life insurance plan, as opposed if they pay it all up front. That's different. Where I've had the most success on the pre-need plans is when a final expense prospect gets talked into buying one. And the way you'll see it is it's a plan that has a 7 to 10 year payoff. Okay. They have to pay on it for 7 to 10 years before it's paid off. And when you do the premiums and you add them all together, what you see is they'll pay $20,000 for a $10,000 burial, right? And I like to relate it to, it's like, here's a truck, here's an F-150, it's $10,000. And then here's another one that's $20,000. Where are you going to buy the truck at? Well, the $10,000, duh. I said, but you're stuck in the $20,000. You see what I'm saying? Add the math up here. You're paying 20 grand for something that should cost 10. And they're like, I never thought about it that way. And then I'll say, so here's what we can do that's better. We can actually cut the price by a third or a half. So instead of paying $100 a month, we can pay 50, many times for the same premium or for the same face amount. So we can get you a $10,000 plan. It's $50 a month. You got to pay it the rest of your life. But what happens is you got more money up front now, and you're in a situation where you're not overpaying for something that you know you're going to use. So I use that route most often, but that's rare because a lot of our prospects don't buy pre-need. Our true prospects, they're buying a final expense plan. And I very rarely talk a middle-class person out of dropping their pre-need plan for, especially if it's set up right, for a final expense plan. So the angle there, it's going to go back to things like, well, why would a pre-need plan not be enough? Maybe if you don't have enough money on hand, or if you end up in a nursing home and you need extra money just to pay for the what ifs, you know, a $5,000 or $10,000 plan, just to have that on hand might just be a good idea, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring us, like with the financial side, like what David's saying. But that's a tougher sale if they've got it. It's decent, like it's a 5-year or less payoff period. I'm not going to really attack that. I'm going to try to complement that. Does that make sense? Let's bring Sarah on here. Hey, Sarah, what's going on?
Hello. So
Hey.
last week I had a lead's house who I was at, and the husband really was adamant about going down to the funeral home, and he was going to just prepay for everything. That way he would avoid inflation. Everything would be paid for and he wouldn't have to worry about it.
Sure.
The perspective, I mean, I said a couple things, but I'd like to hear what you would say about that.
My response goes back to what I talked about, because there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? If you want to protect against inflation, then what you're going to have to do is pay a lot more in premium up front, and more premium in than the amount that you get back. Because if you look at a pre-need policy and you do the math, and if it's especially a 7 or 10 year process, you're going to pay a lot more in than the value that you're protecting. Now, the funeral home will say, well, it protects inflation. To a degree it does, but there's elements that are not necessarily guaranteed in that contract, like flowers or some elements of the funeral service itself. I don't know specifically, but it doesn't necessarily cover everything. And look, the way we would handle inflation, and I would say, hey, that's why I'm here. How we handle it, as opposed to charging you out the nose more than what you're going to actually end up getting, you're going to take your budget and we'll just get you, instead of 10,000, we'll get you 20,000. So you can handle inflation that way by getting a bigger plan and then having enough for the foreseeable future, not just for today. So that's the angle I go with. But is that really the objection? I don't know. There's probably something underneath it. Maybe there's something there, and that I would maybe go that route after answering it that way, and then see what they take from there. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, a few months back, I had gone to a client's home, and after looking at he had like 15 accidental policies, and then he had a funeral home plan. And as we went through it, the one thing and the main thing he wanted paid for was his cremation. Well, the cremation wasn't even checked. So his family would have had to go back and, still pay for the cremation. So anyway, he was furious, and needless to say, I was able to sell him a policy. But
did you convince him to drop all those junky accidental plans and save him money there too?
Yes, he actually did. Yep. And I felt terrible because he had been paying into the funeral home for probably a year, I think it was already. So, and he was just in a bad position, but it was my highest AP that I've ever sold.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is the benefit of going in and reviewing policies. Was he, I'm curious, Sarah, if you could share this, it would be helpful for everybody to listen to. Did he already know the problem, or did you have to go in and like walk him through and show him the policy for him to see the problem?
Oh, he had no idea. He actually thought that he was covered. And I'm not good about getting the policy out. That's something I'm working on, but for whatever reason, I was pretty persistent there. And I'm so glad that I did, because they really did end up in a much better position. And he truly, sincerely wanted to protect his family. So I was able to help him do that. It was good.
Thank you. And thanks for doing that. And for those of you face-to-face like Sarah, that's the difference between mediocrity and success in this business, is taking people who don't know that they're in trouble and helping them see the light. And many times that revolves around getting them to get their information on their insurance policies and then showing them what they got. Probably 3 out of 4 times it's totally different than what they think. I mean, I would say a quarter of my policy sales in my business were replacements. And had I not been adamant about, hey, go get your policy, let's take a look, I would have lost it on so many sales.
Since they're kind of like face to face though, how do you dive into that kind of deep policy review that they might have of the already existing policies when you're in telesales? Like, for instance, if I had someone in Sarah's case on the phone, how would I dive into like his situation in particular?
Yeah, that's probably one of the inadequacies of selling over the phone, is that you just aren't going to get as many replacements as you will in person. The in-person experience just presents to you many more options, and you have the ability to lay hands and see it with your eyes and then show them, which helps progress the sale. Now, what I will say for telesales agents, you should be able to replace the simple stuff, the most common stuff. Yeah, I've got a plan from Colonial Penn. When did you buy it? If you've developed enough rapport and trust with them, you tell them it's a 2-year wait, they're going to believe you and drop it. Okay. Or if you plan, they've gone through a price increase, or they pull it out and see its term, they're going to drop it and buy the one from you. Right. Like, and that's the most common replacements that you'll see. But a lot of those more complex deals, like universal life plans that are exploding, some of these pre-need deals, the more just moving parts ones, those are just harder to get over the phone because you can't see what they got. And them getting it, and then how do they share it? They're not going to screenshot it and send it to you. You know, I mean, you can try, but it's just harder. They think it's free. No problem. All I need is 5 minutes to show you this information. What you do with it's up to you. It's free for you to check out. How about I stop by at 10 o'clock, or does 2 work better? When you're in the home, I always say, yeah, the information was free, Mrs. Prospect. Now, these are state regulated plans. That just means that the states approve them or allowed to help you with them, but they're from companies that, or that kind of thing. You've heard of those, right? Yeah. And then I just continue on from there. These people know it's not free. You're not the first card or Facebook ad they've sent off, I assure you.